want to talk about SQL, what it is, sort of how it works, and how to write. Also, talk about how to write an SQL statement. So, SQL stands for Structured Query Language, and it's just the way, uh, fundamentally, it's just the way to retrieve data from a database. So, you might have a database with 2,000 uh, transactions in it, maybe customer purchases or something like that. So what SQL allows you to do is pull out specific things, maybe just the amounts of the transactions, or maybe just transactions that occurred in a certain month. So generally speaking, that's what SQL does. It takes all the data from a database, which could be hundreds of thousands of records, and pulls out certain things, um, puts them in a certain order. So it's a way of extracting, manipulating, basically getting data out of a database. So how it works is you create what's called a query to do that. Um, and before I get into the query and how to write an SQL statement, I just want to talk about the approach to take. So it's really hard to start writing a query unless you see the underlying data, the underlying table, and kind of are familiar with it. So the first step really to SQL is looking at the table or the tables where you're trying to get the data out of. So I've got an example here, and then we'll write an SQL statement or two. So before I start writing my SQL, I'm going to look at this. I've got a table with some patient data in it. The table is called patient master. So one thing you got to understand about the table is what's in it, but also what fields there are to choose from. So notice this has got a bunch of patient data, which is mostly just names, addresses, phone numbers, things like that. So now that I've kind of seen the data, I can start to visualize, okay, maybe my query will just pull out people that live in a certain city, or maybe just pull out just the names and the phone numbers, right? So we don't want all this stuff that's in the table, maybe we just want a certain subset of it. So now that I've seen, or again, the approach would probably be, as you're writing your query, take a look at the table, take a look at the field names, right? Here are the field names of the table, and then you'll be better equipped to write your query properly. So I'll go back and forth from that, but let's go ahead and write a query that does what I mentioned. We'll write a query that pulls out the patient name and maybe just their phone number from this table. So as I'm going through that, I'm going to talk about the syntax of an SQL statement. So go ahead and write my query here. So pretty much every SQL query is going to start with a keyword select. All right, so you start your query with select, and I'll talk more about the syntax as I go through it. The next thing you're going to put after that are the fields that you want to pull out of the table. So out of this patient master table, I just want the patient name field and the phone field. So that's what's going to follow the select, those exact field names as they appear in the table. So that's again why it's a good idea to know what's in the table, know the exact names of the fields, how they're spelled, and so forth. That's important as you're writing your query. So I'm going to select patient name, and again, that's just one of the fields in the table. And if I want another field, I'm going to put comma and space, and then the second field name. And you can continue to do that for as many fields as you want. So in this case, I just want two fields. I want patient name and phone. And again, going back here, those are how they are named in the table. So that should match up. So as you're writing that, watch your spelling, watch your capitalization, all that kind of stuff. So I've got select, fields, patient name, comma, space, phone. Once you've got the fields that you want to pull out in your select statement, you're always going to have a from keyword. So select fields from table name. One thing you'll notice, let me go ahead and finish that up and then I'll talk more about the syntax. So from is going to be followed by the name of the table. So again, make sure you understand your database and what your tables are named. That table is called patient master. Let's go ahead and run this and we'll talk, then I'll talk more about the exact syntax that you have to be very careful of as you start learning how to write SQL statements. So I've written my statement here. I'm going to run it, see if it works. All right, I've got the table open, so I guess I got to close it first. So there it returns our results, just 2 fields from that table. So instead of pulling all the data out and having to sift through it, now I can quickly see this person and their phone number. Let's look at this statement and make sure we understand the syntax though. So in SQL, it's a very good habit to get into, and it's a very good form to capitalize your SQL keywords. So notice select and from are keywords in SQL, so those should be capitalized. As far as the field names and the table names, they should just match whatever's in your database, right? So we've got those keywords capitalized, and everything else should just match the database. And again, one last thing to emphasize on this particular query, select fields from table. So we've got select field number 1, comma space, field number 2, from, name of the table is patient master. And again, the field names just match up with what are in the table.